Hi, John. Hi, Paul.
Are we ready yet?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Moore. I'm the chair of the Safer Neighbourhoods and Active Community Scrutiny Board. Under current regulations, this meeting is being held virtually to facilitate attendance and to enable the consideration of important matters during the current COVID-19 situation. This meeting will operate with members of the board joining us remotely to contribute and vote on any matter. I'd ask all attendees to mute their microphones unless they've been invited to speak. And should you experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, contact Deborah Breeden from Democratic Services. Depending on the device that you are using to log in with, please use the hand up icon on the control bar if you would like to speak, or type a question mark in the chat bar. The chair and myself will then indicate when you can speak. And when you're finished, please remember to mute your microphone. Following questions and a debate, and in order to make a decision on an item, I'll ask members in turn whether they are for or against the proposal, or if they wish to abstain. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed online, and members of the public and the press are allowed by law to film, audio record, or to take photographs during the meeting. What I would also say as well, we obviously do have a full council meeting at 7 o'clock this evening. That meeting was arranged after this particular meeting, but I do intend to try and wrap the meeting up for around 40 this evening to allow members plenty of time to get on the particular meeting. Firstly, can I ask all scrutiny members to introduce themselves? Councillor Bauer.
Hello. Hello.
Are you there, Councillor Bauer? Right, I think we'll come back to Councillor Bauer. Councillor Edwards?
Yes, Chair. Councillor John Edwards, member of this committee.
Councillor Manjit Gill?
Councillor Manjit Gill, Councillor for Smethwick Ward.
Councillor Mohammed Yassin?
Yeah, Councillor Mohammed Yassin, Tipton Green Ward, and a member of Safer Neighbourhoods and Active Community Scrutiny Board.
Councillor Paul Sandars?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Paul Sandars here, member for Hagley Heath Ward.
Okay, and lovely to see you back, Councillor. And Councillor Akhtar?
Hello, Councillor Smile Akhtar, St Paul's Ward, member of the committee.
Now, I don't believe I've missed any members. Can I also introduce Alex Goddard and Deborah Breeden from Democratic Services, who will be supporting the meeting, and also Alan Caddick, the Council's Director, who will be coming to present one of the reports for us this evening. Can I ask whether there are any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Mr. Cash, the co-opted member on this board.
Okay. Agenda item 2 is the minutes from the meeting held on the 27th of February, as presented. Can I ask whether they're approved or whether there's any amendments that members wish to make? I'm happy to propose the minutes. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor Mohammed Yassin.
Councillor Yassin. Okay. Agenda item 3 is members to declare any interests in matters to be discussed at the meeting. Could I ask whether any member has an interest to declare? Okay, no items to declare. Agenda item 4 is the COVID-19 Reset and Recovery Plan for the Neighbourhoods Directorate. And we have Alan Caddick here, who's going to make a short presentation of around 15 to 20 minutes. I'm pleased to say that Alan has kept the slides to a minimum. I think we've only got 5 or 6, which should allow plenty of time for debate and questions from members. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and share my presentation. Just bear with me a second, please. Can members see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's better.
The floor is yours, Alan.
Okay. Okay. As the cover report says, this is very much to give some updates to the Scrutiny Board on the reset and recovery process and the activities that we are doing within Neighbourhoods. So I'm going to take you through this presentation and then obviously open to any questions. Firstly, I wanted to talk about the process that has been put in place to make sure we have the governance around the reset and recovery process. And this was agreed at Emergency Committee back on the 27th of May. So what we've got is we've established a Reset and Recovery Board, which is basically a leadership team, which meets weekly. And there's a defined process for the restarting of services, inclusive of a Reset and Recovery Pro Forma, which all service areas and service leads are expected to complete. There's risk assessments that have to be done on every element of the restart, and that can account of government guidance, which, as you can probably imagine, is various. And there's also engagement and consultation with trade unions, which we do. There's a three times a week there are meetings with the trade unions, and anything that is going to be going to Reset and Recovery Board has to go through that consultation engagement with the trade unions. And then also there are other consultees, public health, health and safety, facilities management where people are going back into a building, and HR and communications. And all restart plans need to be signed off by all consultees before going to the Reset and Recovery Board. So that, in effect, is the process that has been put in place to manage the reset and restart of services. So moving us on to talk about Neighbourhoods. A range of services.
Sorry, Alan. Councillor Yassine, would you be able to just mute your microphone, please? We're getting a little bit of feedback from you.
Sorry, mate.
Sorry, Alan. Go ahead.
Okay. So a range of services have restarted or increased their activities, and others are planned. So things that have already started: grounds maintenance, and we've got a 3-phase approach to the restart of services. The first phase, which we're in at the moment, very much involves elderly persons, communal areas, sports pitches, parks and schools. And then from next week, we'll go into the second phase of that approach, which is wider green areas. And then the third phase will be very much verges, traffic islands and banks. And as I say, that's the sort of phasing we've done to incrementally increase the activity around grounds maintenance and grass cutting per se. In respect of housing repairs, we did have essential repairs only being done, and they were about 900 a week. So we're still doing a significant amount of repairs from emergency essential repairs. What's happened now is we're now seeing an increase in activities which will enable non-urgent repairs to be completed. As you can imagine, there are a number of non-urgent repairs that are stacking up, have stacked up over a period of time, and that is the first piece of work we're going to do is contacting people to see whether those repairs are still required, and then we will put the necessary appointments in place to deal with them. CCTV and concierge services, we did take the night shift off and just add the day shift. The night shift have now been introduced, so we're back to full service, and that is doing what it does in the town centres and on our blocks and some of our communal spaces. And we've also recommenced services and increased activities around Sandwell Valley. So what we have had in place is very much animal welfare. We've had 170 births in the spring, which we've had to manage, and the team has been doing the necessary animal welfare around that. But what we're doing now is upscaling that service to do more work, but also prepare for the winter harvest, which provides the food for the animals in the winter. So, and we're also looking at the next phase of reopening services in the valley, in the farm. So we've got those as things that are ongoing. And then we've got services planned for restart, and again, an increase in activities. So parks, we need to inspect all the play areas prior to potential reopening, and also the allotment service. We've got obviously a number of allotments, over 40 allotments across the borough, and we've been providing a sort of emergency service only. But there are people who want to take on allotments, and we need to start to deal with that. So the inspection of the play areas, though, there's 75 play areas, and workers commenced on inspecting all those play areas and looking at the condition of the equipment and what is required to make it safe or keep it safe. So that, again, is a fair piece of work we need to do. Urban forestry, which is our trees and arboricultural services. Again, we've had emergency inspections, but now, as of next week, we'll be starting full services with inspections across the board. Again, they were approved by the board today. And then we've got estate services and caretaking, and restarting and increasing activities on that, which will be presented to the board next week. And we have continued doing work on our high-rise blocks from a point of view of health and safety, but we will, subject to approval on the 16th, then increase the amount of activity on the blocks and the communal areas. So again, it's all subject to approval. And then we've got some other services planned for restart, which there's no date set as yet. So we've got Lightwoods House, which has been closed for the duration, but again, we are looking at the restart plan for Lightwoods House, and that will also take into account the tenants we have there. So we've got the cafe stroke restaurant, we've got acupuncture set up there, we've got the MP's office, and we've also got a nursery there as well. So we're having to do risk assessments for all of those, and they have to come to the board. If we get things through the unions, that could come next week. And then Samuel Valley Phase 2 is again upping the work on the valley to open up the farms, both Samuel Park Farm and Forge Mill Farm, to the public, so that they can go and visit and enjoy what's at both the farms. Libraries and museums, again, we're pulling together the plans for them, but that'll be a phased reintroduction, which is being considered. And again, we'll be able to say more about that once we've got the forms and the necessary assessments done. And the last one on this page is leisure centres. Now, today there's been an announcement that leisure centres and pools can open from the 25th of June. And there is work ongoing with Salmon Leisure Trust and Places Leisure, who look after the West Bromwich facility. We've not had the guidance as yet. We'll get that guidance, and obviously we have to work to that guidance. But both Salmon Leisure Trust and Places Leisure have been to the Reset and Recovery Board to talk about their plans for restart, subject to guidance and subject to dates being agreed. Now, obviously, with a date being agreed for the 25th, that has got to be considered from their point of view as to how that's going to work. But again, there'll be more information coming on that in due course. And then finally, I just wanted to sort of mention some other areas of note around homelessness. So we have continued with services during the period. We've had significant work done on engaging rough sleepers. So 27 of the 34 known rough sleepers have been accommodated, and the other 7 apparently living with family or friends. So we've basically put the feelers out on those 7, and what we're being told is that they have gone to live with family or friends. We've not seen them, so we're assuming that that is the case. Temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast levels, they're actually the lowest they've been for many years. And that's because we've been doing a lot of work to work with people who are in temporary accommodation to look at how we can move them on. And where we can, we have. What is also important to mention at this point as well is that there is a moratorium on evictions at the moment. So we're not seeing, obviously, people coming through who we might have to accommodate in temporary accommodation. And again, we're preparing plans for when those restrictions are lifted, which is towards the end of August. And then just from a locals point of view, the local teams are still making contact with tenants, over 1,000 contacts a week by telephone or over the internet. And again, we're trying to deliver services to the people and deal with any issues that they may have. So, Chair, that's the sort of end of the presentation as such, and happy to take any questions.
Chair, I think your mic may be muted.
Sorry. Could I just welcome Dr. Alison Knight, Executive Director for Neighbourhoods, who's also joined us, and Councillor Stephen Jones, who joined just as the presentation started from Princess End Ward as well. Alison, is there anything you wish to add to what Alan has said? Alison, are you there? Okay, well, I propose then we go on to questions from members of the board. I have had advance notification from Councillor Stephen Jones that he would like to ask a question. So I'll go to Councillor Jones first. If I could ask if you can raise the hand on Microsoft Teams if you do wish to ask a question, or if you can type a question in the chat bar. But we'll go to Councillor Stephen Jones first.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Just a question. Many of my constituents are going back to work. Some have worked all the way through, haven't been furloughed. And I'm just wondering when we can get back to full service with democratic and committee services, which means that we can actually start turning up for our scrutiny, our our town tasking meetings, our monthly meetings. You can catch a flight next week from the 15th of January, so you can sit next to somebody on a plane. And we've just been told the gyms are open now from the 25th. So the risk, every other organisation seems to be managing the risk. Why is it that we can't manage with sensible precautions and social distancing, full council and cabinet, etc.? Just look forward to any answers or any thoughts, please, where we can actually get back to representing our constituents.
Alan?
Is that actually a question for me? Again, I think that's all part of the process we have to go through around restart, around the democratic side of things. Obviously, it's not something I'm totally best placed to answer in that respect. But I do know, obviously, that some town meetings are being held and tasking meetings are being held virtually. I think it's obviously the next stage is to do some risk assessments around starting more sort of face-to-face and personal meetings. But again, that's something that will be led through democratic services.
Okay, are there any other members who wish to ask a question? Councillor Edwards?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just going back to the homelessness slide, Alan.
Yeah.
I assume, and I hope, and I assume that the aim there that we've housed everybody at the start or during the start of the crisis, I assume the ambition there is to make sure that we keep people housed, that we end homelessness by and large altogether in the borough. If you can confirm that, that would be helpful, and how we intend to do that. And just in connection with the temporary accommodation, how soon or can we turn temporary accommodation into permanent accommodation for those people who are currently in temporary accommodation?
Okay. The first question first. Yeah, what we are doing at the moment is doing a lot of work in this period to prepare for what might come when restrictions are lifted, because what we'll have is a bit of a logjam of potential issues as particularly private landlords start to take action to maybe recover their properties, sorry. So we're putting things in place around that now. We're doing work with private landlords, so we're actually engaging to actually get them to work with us. My intention always been is to reduce homelessness and eradicate it as much as possible. And I think now that we've got our policies a lot better fashioned, we've got the teams a lot better prepared, and we've got very good management of those teams in place now, I'm confident that we can actually start to see the trend of reductions in temporary accommodation, reductions in people rough sleeping continue. What we need to do, and I think it's important, is that at the moment, because government have eased certain things around policy, we can house people, and there's a big push to government at the moment to continue with some of those easements because they have helped and they have worked. And I think that's something that the sector as a whole is trying to get government to learn from and listen to. So some of it was out of our hands, but what I'm confident, Councillor Edwards, is that we've got plans in place, we've got good engagement in place, and we can do a lot better than we have done previously. So I want to give you that reassurance that we've got that a lot better prepared now. And we have used the time whilst we have been in lockdown to do a lot of work to prepare for that. So I just want to give you the confidence around that. And again, in terms of temporary accommodation, as I say, we have taken opportunity to move people on where we can, and people are benefiting from that. So we've been able to do essential moves, people, and that is reducing our temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast numbers, which is also reducing cost as well, because our costs for temporary accommodation, probably average on year is over £600,000. So we're bringing that right down as well. So there's a cost imperative, but also a human imperative to keep people out of temporary accommodation. And if we can do a lot more upstream to stop people getting into a homeless situation, then really about the information we get and the early stage to manage their issues to prevent them becoming homeless in the first place. I think too much in the past, we've done it too late and we've reacted to situations rather than being proactive. And I want to again give you the reassurance that with the things we've put in place, I'm a lot more confident that we will proactively prevent homelessness going forward.
Okay, I can see Alison Knight, Executive Director of Neighbourhoods, has joined us. Alison, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what Alan has already said before I take some more questions.
Sorry, I was a few minutes late, but I thought I'll put the camera on just in case you hadn't seen me come into it. Not really. I mean, Alan talked the bits that I think we've probably been doing quite a lot of work on and that were covered at budget scrutiny, which I know you couldn't get to, Councillor Moore. Were really the bits that I have been sort of picking up are around the leisure management and the potential issues there around the sustainability of leisure across the borough. And as I say, I did quite a comprehensive update for budget and corporate scrutiny on Tuesday, was it? Wasn't Monday, was it? I think it was Tuesday night. which set out the work that we're doing with SLT, who run 9 of our centres and Places Leisure. And Alan referred to them coming to Reset and Recovery. So quite a lot of work going on. We've got another catch up with SLT tomorrow to go through some of that work. And we're also working with a Sport England recommended consultant, and Sport England are supporting that work to help us to assess what type of financial need as well as other needs both providers, but I guess particularly SLT, will need really to continue going forward. And what we've also been doing is continuing to pay their management fee, even though they're clearly not providing services. So I think that's probably the bit that I wanted to just give you a little bit more detail on. But anything else that you want to ask, I'm happy to answer that.
I'll come in with a couple of questions in a moment, but are there any other members who may wish to come in at this point?
Could I just ask a supplementary, Paul, on the homelessness response?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Edwards.
Thanks for the response, Alan. I'm heartened by that and the attempts to eradicate homelessness completely. Can I ask, Chair, that we note that and maybe get another report from Alan in November, before in the run up to winter, on where we are with homelessness, so that we can be sure that we've reached the ambition that we've set for ourselves.
Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Suggestion. I'm sure we can take that forward as part of the work plan. Could I ask a few questions around the neighbourhood offices, and in terms of where we are with sort of full reopening of those services for people to pay rent, etc.?
Again, we're not looking at that as a total priority at the moment. We've got other things we need to be getting started, and we need to look at what, again, as we've learned, again, lockdown, because people have been finding other ways of getting a service, of paying their rent, paying their various things they need to pay. So we need to look at that in respect of the offices going, and obviously work with the local town teams, members included, as to what it will mean for each of the areas. So, there's a lot of work going on at the moment around transforming local services, workplace vision, and we need to take all those things into account in respect of our locals.
So there's no target date at the moment to reopen?
Not at the moment.
Towards
No, there's no target there at the moment for the locals, but again, we'll start to look at those things in due course.
Could I just ask a further question as well, which does cross into the Highways and Environment Committee as well, but obviously one of the big questions at the moment, which does come under the Neighbourhoods Directorate, is around grass cutting and grass cutting services as well. I'm aware that obviously we've started to cut the parks and the major open spaces, but I'm sure you'll have probably seen quite a lot of the comments on the council's Facebook page and perhaps online about when we're going to start getting to cutting some of the estates, etc., and some of the grass verges near people's homes. I wonder if you could give a bit more of an update on that.
Yeah, as I said in the presentation, the first phase was elderly persons, communal areas, sports pitches, parks and schools. And the schools are very much in response to the schools wanting some outdoor space to use if children were coming back, etc. So we're very much looking at that. And then the next phase, which starts from next week, will be those wider open spaces and estate areas. And then the final phase of that would be verges, traffic islands and banks. So the various banks that we've got across the borough. Looking across to the other scrutiny board, as you mentioned, there is also an initiative there around rewilding. That is about looking at our grass verges and rewilding them. So we're also looking at how we can actually, maybe not cut some of those verges and look at rewilding those areas. And that is something that there's going to be a rewilding day inquiry, a virtual one at the moment, to talk about the areas that we would look at doing and how we would manage that process. So what we had to do is incrementally increase the services, and what has also been the case is that it's taking longer to cut those grassed areas, because obviously the grass is high, so it's taking longer to do things than we normally would, and that obviously delay things. But we do want to, again, do more from next week and then start to look at the verges thereafter. So I would say within the next few weeks we'd be looking at those things and doing more work around them. But there is that overlap with the rewilding inquiry, which is looking at some of our grass verges not being cut and remaining wild. So that's just where we are at the moment.
Councillor Mohammed Yassin.
Hi all, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yep, yeah, Chair, most inquiries, what I've come across is a lot of elderly people pay regarding their payment for council tax and rent payments. I mean, that everybody hasn't got access to the internet or computers, so what things have we got in place for those individuals with arrears, Chair?
Alan?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we're doing at the moment is there's no enforcement as such for people in arrears or people who are unable to pay their rent as such. But what we are looking at, both from a revenues and benefits point of view, so council tax, and from a housing rent point of view, is looking at what sort of losses we're incurring at the moment, and then looking at how we might then start to talk to people about how they can start to pay off their arrears or pay their debts as such. So it won't be a sort of big bang, we're going to enforce and whatever. We've got to work with people, and that work will involve obviously a lot of conversations with people. We do need to get that income in. It's important that we do that, because that's the lifeblood of delivering services. But it's doing it in a very managed way and a very sensitive way and sympathetic way with people, so that we will put payment plans in place which will reflect their ability to pay, and we can actually then work with them to manage their accounts thereafter. So that's work that's ongoing at the moment between the housing rents people and revenues and benefits from the corporate centre.
Alan, can I just carry on from there? I've come across individuals where they've not been penalised or they haven't been threatened with any action. Obviously, it says that that's on hold, but there's individuals where they've been reminded that if they're on a payment plan, their first payment hasn't been paid or the second payment hasn't been paid. Obviously, they haven't got access into the offices to go and pay, and they haven't got access on the internet. So would we be looking at for individuals like that?
Well, yes, those reminders will continue because people still have the obligation to pay rent. But there are other ways of paying it. You know, the people are paying in other places. So you don't need an office to go into to pay your rent. And lots of people are still paying the rent through other means. So, you know, that really is not an excuse for not paying rent, that you can't go into the office to do it. And again, we're doing a lot of contact with people with welfare rights. You know, we've got significant work being done with welfare rights with people where we know that people might be getting into trouble, and we can have those conversations with them. So the reminders are, you know, important that we do that, because people still have the obligation to pay the rent. We're not going to take it to an enforcement level at this point. We've got to work with people to try and have a managed rent account or a managed council tax account. So, you know, there are facilities for people to pay, and people are paying. So, you know, that's not really an excuse for not paying your rent. There's facility out there.
Okay. Could I ask a few questions around the Leisure Trust and the restart of leisure services? I'm aware from another number of other local authority areas that pre-booking at leisure centres is likely to be the likely direction of travel, which will obviously mean fewer people attending leisure centres potentially, which will obviously have a consequential knock-on in terms of SLT's income. Is there anything perhaps you can comment around that, and planning perhaps that's going into that as well, either Alison or Alan?
Yeah, I can pick this up, and then Alan can come in with anything else as well. Yeah, there is a lot of planning going into pre-book sessions to make sure that there's social distancing at the centres. People are being advised about, cleanliness, about hand washing, taking along their own wipes, not using towels and things like that, taking along their own refreshments. So clearly there will be an impact, because you won't be able to have as many people along with, other sectors that we're seeing. There will be an impact. There will be less people using this. SLT, for example, are looking at potentially moving a lot of their equipment into a very large area so that they get enough space in between the equipment for usage. I think the recommended is 3 metres sort of square around, because 2 metres, whilst I know that the distancing has reduced within government guidelines, when you're exercising, clearly there's going to be, you're going to be putting people more at risk with particularly heavy exercise. So that's what they're looking at. What we're working with them, and Continuum Leisure, which is the consultants we mentioned that are recommended by Sport England, have been doing quite a bit of work on their forecasting, which we're still waiting for them to work out what they think that is, particularly SLT, and looking at, what their existing reserves are, what their existing other assets are and other things, and also the fact that we have been supporting them with their management fee, which works out, given that their management fee this year is about 2.9 million, it works out at around £243,000 per month, which we've been paying since March. That has to be on the basis of an open book, and we have just been provided that information mostly by SLT. That's something that the consultant is verifying. I think there's a few things that we just need clarification on. And I think until they've really done that work and really checked with SLT about, the income that they're getting in from us anyway, plus the loss of income and what their costs have been, because another factor to take into account is that most of their costs are likely to be staffing, which of course most of their staff, the vast majority, have been furloughed, so 80% of the salaries have been covered by the job retention scheme. So it's taking all that into account really, and we had a brief conversation with the consultants this morning, and tomorrow we have a meeting with the management team at SLT, and the consultant will go through some of those findings. The initial findings, or the initial thoughts we had with our finance team, was that they were certainly going to be able to manage until the end of June. We're now into July, so we're now looking at that further information and whether we will need to support them further. But we are working really closely and in line with their government guidance. So I hope that wasn't too lengthy an answer.
Thank you, Alison. I am conscious this is our first virtual meeting, and we have got a few members who haven't asked a question yet. So I'll just check there aren't any questions perhaps from those members. Councillor Gill, I don't know whether there's anything you wish to ask.
I'm okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Akhtar?
No, nothing I'd like to ask. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Bauer? You're okay. Councillor Jones, I don't know whether you have any further questions you wish to ask.
No, just to add on, really, just to know when the neighbourhood offices are opening. I mean, my constituents go to work, they're complaining at me about paying council tax and the services aren't there, so they're safe to go to work. When are we safe to go to work?
Okay, so another question around neighbourhood officers. Alison or Alan, can one of you take that?
Yeah, I mean, I've already said what the situation is. People don't have to go into the neighbourhood office to pay their bills. And that's a really important point I've got to make. And I think what we found in the last 3 or 4 months is that people have, changed to a different way of paying their bills. So they don't have to go into the local office to do that. And we need to think about the local offices and how they're going to work going forward. And that's the same with all our buildings, because we're going to have to look at all our buildings differently. So we need to have a managed approach to that. Services are still being provided, and albeit for people working from home, and that's really where we need to be thinking about going forward. What we need to do is look at how we can be more visible and more active in our communities, and that again is something we'll be looking at.
Okay, Councillor Sanders, are there any questions you may wish to ask?
Nothing from me. I'm happy that the conversation has gone.
Okay, Councillor Yassine, you've indicated you have a further question.
Yeah, as Alan said, there's other setups. What I was referring to is basically elderly people who used to coming to Oldbury, walking in the council house or walking to their local neighbourhood. They are having difficulties. I think they're allowed to pay points as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's the question.
Okay. Are there any further questions for members? Seems we're all very eager to get to the full council meeting. I'll turn to recommendations of the board. We are asked to consider and comment upon the information presented at the meeting, as we already have done, and consider how the board can best help and support the council's reset and recovery plan. I'd ask members at this point whether there are any specific board recommendations we would like to make. We already discussed a further report on homelessness to come. I think Councillor Edwards indicated November potentially for that report. I'd suggest maybe a little bit earlier than that, Councillor, if possible, perhaps October, before we start to get into the colder weather. Might be worth bringing it to the October meeting instead. Are there any specific recommendations members would like to make? I'm taking silence as a no. Alex, have I missed anything?
No, Chair. The only recommendation that I'd extracted was Councillor Edwards' request for that report to go onto the work programme, which of course we'll take away in action. I would also like to state, though, that Councillor Padder has sent a message to submit his apologies. He's in another meeting. I just wanted to make sure that was recorded.
Okay, thank you. Before we end the meeting, Alison and Alan, can we just commend your teams and extend a thank you for all of the work that you have been doing during very difficult circumstances. I know there's an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes at the council in terms of planning for reopening services, and obviously a whole range of different work that we've been involved with during the pandemic, including things such as the food centre work at Ticton, which I know you've also both been heavily involved in. So a big thank you to both yourselves for the leadership and direction that you've shown during the difficult times during the pandemic, and also if you can pass on our thanks to your teams for their work as well.
Thank you.
I will close the meeting, and we will see everybody shortly at the full council meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.